Artificial intelligence is taking humans to places we couldn't go before. That's what makes this the age of with. The next question is, where can humans take AI? AI is an ecosystem we all contribute to and benefit from. The next important insight could come from anywhere. And with so much happening so fast, this ecosystem needs a focal point. We created the Global Deloitte AI Institute to answer that need. What role can AI play in my business? How can we use AI in trustworthy and ethical ways? Why isn't there more diversity in the AI workforce? How does my AI career start? And where is AI going next? The Deloitte AI Institute is leading the global conversation on AI. We are connecting businesses, universities, think tanks, policymakers, and startups. We are highlighting today's visionaries, data scientists, and emerging trendsetters. From the boardroom to the college lab, the Deloitte AI Institute is bringing forth insights and using our deep knowledge of all aspects of AI to make sense of this complex ecosystem, cutting through all the hype and providing insights to help enterprises make informed AI decisions. I'm Beena Amanat. I'm the Executive Director at the Deloitte AI Institute, where we are not just preparing to meet the AI future, we are shaping it together. Join me online to find out more.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our LinkedIn Live session today. We've got a great and growing audience out there, so we're really excited to have all of you join our conversation. My name is Jim Rowan, a principal at Deloitte Consulting, and I lead our strategy and analytics business. Aside from leading that practice, I spend a lot of time in the market engaging with our clients on conversations around AI, data, and how those are impacting their businesses. We're really excited today to have a great team to talk to you about this concept called an evergreen CIO. We think the market is changing dramatically for the way businesses are addressing the technology changes that they're facing. We want to talk to Dave Harris, CIO from Shake Shack, to understand a little bit about what he's experiencing, as well as Dominic and Stephanie to hear some of their thoughts and comments about what they're seeing in the marketplace. Hopefully you guys will enjoy the dialogue, and when the conversation's open for chat, so please feel free to drop your questions into the LinkedIn Live comments below, and we'll try to address those as the conversation continues. So with that, Dave, maybe you could give us a brief introduction.
Yes, Jim, thanks. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon from New York. I'm Dave Harris, the head of technology for Shake Shack. I lead the technology organization in a rapidly growing restaurant chain. Shake Shack has just opened its 500th restaurant. We have restaurants in 17 plus countries, and continuing to grow. And it's great to be here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Stephanie, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Perrone-Goldstein. I am a principal in Deloitte's AI and data strategy practice. And I have the pleasure of working across our consumer brands, consumer companies, helping them think through how they can enable their business strategies, leveraging data, analytics, and AI. I'm thrilled to be here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. And last but not least, Dominic.
Yep. Hi, everybody. I'm Dominic Rosini, a senior manager based out of the New York office and a data and analytics transformation leader at Deloitte. I support our clients to define and build the functional competencies and technical capabilities that enable their organization to become more data-driven. And I take particular interest in how to establish and align data and analytics operational approaches with the overall strategic objectives of the enterprise to realize evergreen value.
Awesome. So a great panel for a conversation today. And I want to start the conversation off, if you don't mind, Dave. I'm going to throw the first question to you. And really, I think we've been seeing a tremendous amount of change in the marketplace over the last decade, over the last few months. I think like the pace of change just constantly seems to be increasing. We've got a rise of data-driven analytics. We have AI, machine learning. All these different things are coming at us. So I'd love to understand from you, like, how has the traditional role of the CIO, I would say, evolved over the last decade? And what are some of the characteristics, competencies that are really needed to be this evergreen CIO?
Sure. So I think in general, the CIO role has been through tremendous change over the last decade. I think if you look back, to start with, it was very much IT was an order-taking department. It tended to be the recipient of just requests from around the company. And over time, it's transitioned to be much more of a business partner role and business partnering function. So I think that's happening generally in IT. In the data space, it's been about how to ensure we're getting value from our data. So are we collecting and holding the right data? Are we organizing it in a way that teams around the company can leverage? We operate a federated model in the data space. So we have teams of analysts around the company who are looking to be able to leverage that data for insight. So really, partnership is the name of the game to ensure that we're providing that data and they can mine it for insights that can help drive our business forward.
That's awesome. I mean, I think, Dave, like as you think about that, the value creation aspect is so important around the data space. And maybe like something I'd love to pick up, Stephanie or Dom, maybe you guys could comment a little bit about how that value creation happens when you think about the role and the collaboration aspect that role has to play, and like what you guys are seeing from some of the accounts that you're talking to, having those conversations. Maybe I'll throw it to you, Stephanie, first to kind of get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So value creation is absolutely critical in any data analytics or AI initiatives. And I think that at least what I've seen, driving success for organizations is anchoring on whatever their corporate strategy is. So what are the key things that we're trying to achieve? How do we make sure that we're thinking about our data analytics and AI portfolio in support or as an enabler of the things that we're trying to achieve as an organization? And across the organization, getting aligned on what are those things? What are we going to go after? How are we going to prioritize those? And ultimately, how are we going to what is the value that we're trying to create? And how are we going to measure that value? And so seeing this come to life in a lot of different ways. It's a little harder on the data side when you're doing some foundational data work or you're enabling data for accessibility or to enable others throughout the business to get access to it. However, there are ways to establish and measure value, whether that's enabling a specific business function to do different analytics, et cetera, and what that's going to yield in terms of dollars or increased revenue or savings. In addition to that, I think it's really important when we're talking about AI and again, measuring the upside or the cost savings that you anticipate, and then making sure we're rigorous in how you measure that going forward.
Yeah. And Steph, if I can add, for those who have spent some time in the article, the first thing we say is that we're at a time of redefining how to manage these capabilities. And as data programs and data estates have scaled and grown, and then also as organizational maturity has grown, we've seen roles expand and ultimately can lead to the introduction of new roles like chief analytics officers, chief AI officers, and so on. But the reinforcement of transparent and collaborative governance practices that are aligned to that delivery of value, that enterprise understanding of what the strategic objectives are, is the connective tissue between those roles. And that unified approach to making sure that the organization is taking steps to achieve and realize that value becomes that critical success factor.
I mean, it's interesting you guys are mentioning the roles piece as well, right? We saw with the executive order that was shared last week from President Biden for the US around the need to create chief AI officers in some of the departments and things like that. I mean, Dave, I'd love to get your perspective of how you viewed this, currently and also as part of your career in terms of how, what are the right roles in this structure? Do you need all these different pieces? How do they fit together?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the size of organization plays a part here. So we're a smaller entrepreneurial organization. We have still a bit of a startup mentality. We're growing rapidly, and that means everyone wears multiple hats. We don't have the luxury of a big enough organization to have segmented roles in all these different disciplines, whether it be data, AI, analytics. So having flexible leaders that can take on new skills that are sort of tangential or adjacent to their primary role and actually help us get the benefits of these new technologies is really, really important to us. It's about being able to move quickly, being able to prioritize very carefully because there's so much opportunity. I think, when I look at it, there are so many different places you can invest and want to invest. To add on to the whole concept of value, picking the areas where you think there is the most value. And that value can be in lots of different ways. It's not always cost saving. It can be revenue generation, guest insight, lots of operational efficiency, lots of different ways to think about value. But being able to say, okay, this is something that we want to go after. I think the thing for AI, for me, and data is there's so much opportunity. Clearly, there's so much opportunity for a company like us. So being able to use a gambling analogy, to place the right bet on the right table in the right place at the right time becomes really important. And that's a combination of judgment, a bit of science, the data you've already got, and really being able to blend those things and say, this is where we should focus.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, Stephen, you spend a lot of time advising clients on these types of hard conversations about how do you prioritize, where you put things on the roadmap. Like, what are some things you think about this space, and how would you continue to add to it?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with Dave. Ruthless prioritization is always key. And just kind of building, Jim, on what you were talking about with the different roles, because I do think that can be a challenge in prioritization, because someone who's overseeing AI may have a different priority than someone who's carefully looking after data versus someone who is focused on BI, right? Like there's different objectives and different things that you're trying to achieve, sometimes with a common foundation or base that's required to do so. So I always try to advise and really work hard. Our clients work really hard to do this, is to make sure that you're treating AI and data as an enterprise capability, an asset, and understand that the business is going to see it that way as well, right? That is critical to enabling successful collaboration, because if we don't think about it that way and it becomes AI is this person's and data is this person's, it doesn't flow, right? So in my experience, I found when a CIO, and frankly, I think with the rise of these other roles, the CDAO, the CDO, the CAIO, there's a lot of things coming, right? That when the CIO can, I think, play a pretty strong role here in helping to forge strong relationships with those executive committee members to maintain a business-focused approach, as Dave was talking about, and make sure that those decisions related to data analytics and AI not only are unified and well supporting the business strategy, but also making sure that those are decisions that are being made collectively as opposed to in silos.
Yeah, and Steph, I'll add that those collective decisions require a shared measure of success, right? An explanation of what success looks like that's unified across that group of individuals, especially as roles start to proliferate, right? And you have more people taking the helm of different capabilities. I'll say that also with that shared measure of success is, as those roles start to increase, an understanding of that individual's contribution to that shared measure of success is also pretty important from a governance perspective, or at least understanding, the RACI matrix as it breaks down. So the shared measure of success and your individual contribution to it is a pretty important success factor.
Makes sense. I mean, there's definitely a proliferation of the roles, but there's also this conversation of, like, if we don't put a name next to the importance of this, will it get driven to the results? Can you actually drive to the end game that you're looking to try to drive for, which makes sense, which I guess kind of drives me to a little bit of the next conversation, which is, we talk about the business value, we talk about the prioritization, all the things the CIO is trying to drive, but then we need to connect it to, like, adoption, right? We have these amazing technologies, we want to use them, but sometimes we can't figure out how to actually get the adoption piece working. And I mean, David, I'm sure you've probably had to deal with some of this in the past or currently, a lot of different things here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it starts me with value, actually, and it was mentioned a bit earlier. Looking through the lens of a strategic plan is always a great thing, because when it comes to adopting something, ultimately that strategic plan provides a great North Star for the organization, because we all want to achieve the results outlined in that plan. So being able to understand how these technologies can help enable and help achieve those goals, I think is one of the ways the CIO and the data organization can play a part. So that's kind of the first one. I think also when it comes to adopting them, for an organization like us, it's a gradual thing, right? Our first foray into machine learning and AI is predominantly through the large big tech platform partners that we've got who are adopting it in their own solutions, right? So it'll be an adopter of those things, and that will give us value within those solutions, and I think good exposure to it. Then I think the sort of next step is dipping our toe in the water of how we can leverage these emerging technologies with our own data to further drive value. And some of it is that there's a lot of technologies out there at the moment. Obviously, there's a lot of buzz around this space in general. There's a lot of innovation happening, which is exciting. Separating, it's going to take some time to separate the winners from the losers and where the value really is. And we'll watch that play out a little bit. But then I think being able to leverage a combination of those technologies and our own data has tons of potential, and we see lots of opportunity. And I think over time we'll try a couple of those things and learn from each of those options. So or each of those attempts. So lots ahead. But I think the key is being able to try things, fail quickly. I mean, that's ultimately what you don't want to do, is go a ways down a road and find, oh, this doesn't do what we thought. So I think being able to do focused proof of concepts, quick proof of concepts, really see if the value is there in the way you think it's going to be, that becomes really critical. And having alignment around, these are the things that we think are worth trying first. Because I think, like everybody, we've got a long list of things we'd love to try. You have to start somewhere. So picking the right things, saying, getting everyone aligned around that, and then going after those quickly, and then going from there is how I think about it.
Yeah. And Dave, just to build on that, totally agree. I've seen also with a number of different organizations that a big challenge to adoption, particularly of AI, is that there's a sort of like desire or concern to protect personal metrics or protect performance in a specific part of the organization, or even to protect certain roles or accountabilities, right? And so in many cases, a lot of times there's tons of ideas, to Dave's point, but sometimes there's only certain ideas that people are going to be comfortable with implementing in their different parts of the business because of the disruption that it may cause. And so a lot of this is, Dave, I totally agree with your notion of proofs of concept and rapid prototyping and testing, found that to be really successful. But it is this also, continuous alignment and review and keeping the business or the part of the function that's involved engaged throughout as you're creating those, so that there's no surprises. And in addition to that, I think it's also important to continue to challenge. That's a role of the CIO or the CAIO to really push the envelope with those business partners and think about what is going to drive them to make that change that may feel risky or uncertain to them, but will ultimately improve the business. That's where a lot of times, I think a lot of the dialogue and the collaboration has to happen in order to drive that adoption.
Yeah, I think that's key. That you mentioned the idea of these sort of personal metrics. It's very easy for data silos to develop. That's a constant struggle, and for people to be concerned about or not wanting to share a KPI or share metrics or share the data that allows that to be driven. So having this notion of data as an enterprise asset, making sure everyone can access it, not being afraid if people have slightly different interpretations, getting alignment around different perspectives on a business outcome or a metric is it's a constant thing, and it's going to, I think, accelerate and get magnified as AI technology gets applied, because we'll be running faster to the insights, and it'll open up more insights for the company.
If I can add, just listening to Dave speak, and Dave and I have had many conversations over the last couple of years, but one of the other challenges is perfection can be the enemy of progress, especially in the adoption of next-gen technologies. And the old way of looking at investments in capability or an asset, like building a new factory, for example. It's pretty tangible. You can understand exactly what it looks like. But there's a need here to adopt an experimentation mindset that ties into Dave's fail fast mentality, which is, what are we trying to achieve? And do we feel that there's some value here that we need to go and pursue and clarify as we move down a path, right? It can't all be defined and validated up front. Sometimes you've got to take a little bit of a leap to get some at-bats and runs on the board to say, this is going to work for us. We need to then move in this direction to better leverage that technology or better leverage that asset that's in our toolbox now.
I'm glad you guys are hitting on this experimentation concept too, because like one of the things I feel like in this landscape is that we're constantly seeing changing new technologies. Sure, there's some platforms out there that are fairly consistent, but then we've got to continue to evaluate what's the right platform to run on, what are the new tools that are coming in. We see startups in the ecosystem every day that have great new ideas. How do they fit into my cybersecurity capabilities, into all the things that need to happen before something can even get on my network? I mean, I'd love to get your perspectives. I throw it out to the group in terms of how you think about that. And is that really the foundation of why you're doing so many proofs of concept and sort of trying things out to test that out?
You know, Jim, I'll say first of all, and maybe this will be a segue to something Dave and I have spoken about in the past, is there's a little bit of a philosophical argument at times about the buy versus build feeling, and especially the adoption of really at-edge next-gen technologies like AI or even generative AI, which gets a lot of discussion right now. The question is, should we try to build something which is going to come with a pretty extensive timeline, some pretty extensive costs? It's a capability. Do we want to take on the responsibility of building that? Or do we want to adopt what some of the service providers and vendors are adding to their platforms and utilize that in the most effective way while we generate that mind acumen about how to adopt AI properly? So elements of it are philosophical, and it's really a question of what stage are you at in terms of making that decision that will, basically determine the path you go down.
Yeah, totally agree, Dom. It's like every organization I worked at, the buy versus build equation has been different based on the needs of that organization, the tech you have, the business goals you've got. So it is an equation you constantly have to look at, say, what's the right move here? And indeed, generally, the places I worked at, the equation has evolved over time as well. It's not fixed. It's not static, and so it's an important consideration. And it's also, I think, important not to get wrapped up in the technology itself. It's about the outcome you're trying to drive. And to get the conversation, sometimes it can get too buried in solutions and not enough on the outcome and how we get there most effectively.
You raise there's one point that I just wanted to add to that, Dave, which is the outcome. The outcome really is also owned by a particular user or particular stakeholder within the organization. So that can't be ignored either. We're driving a particular outcome, and we need to put this in the hands of the right person. That can also be a factor in choosing how to address a particular objective and the choice of buy versus build as well.
Great.
We've got some questions coming in from the audience too, so I want to get to a few of those. For the great conversation. So sorry to take us in a different direction here, but I think this is a really important set of questions. So we've had a couple around the talent space. So a little bit about like what do we see as changing in the talent market around AI, Gen AI, and how that's impacting the organization. And also I would say a little bit around from a data perspective too, like what are some of the skills, how is that changing, I guess, across these? Stephanie, you're pretty close to some of this. Would you like to start first?
Yeah, I can kick us off, and then I'm sure Dom and Dave will have things to add. I think that we are, especially with generative AI, launching as quickly as it has. I think there's been a definite shift from, deep data science and a very big focus on machine learning and building algorithms and RPA and things like that, to the shift towards prompt engineering. And I think we're going to continue to see that shift in skill set. So that'll be a big one to continue to watch. And also just have been working a lot with CIOs, CTOs, et cetera, as they're trying to think about their staffing plans going forward and how their operating model is going to work. That becomes a big shift, right, in how they both work internally and with their partners. I also think, just again, sort of pulling on the string of what we've been talking about, there is a need for the business connected roles that have a very deep understanding. And frankly, this extends to the prompt engineers. This is important for them to have an understanding of the function that they're serving so that they can appropriately train the models to get the outcomes they're trying to drive. But having this business understanding and a hybrid understanding of how to leverage the technology is also something that is highly prevalent. So I think that notion of people who are closer to business and understanding the function and how things work, and being able to not only bridge that gap between the different functions and tech, but also that the shift of the roles to be more functional in nature, I think is another trend that we're seeing, and I think we'll continue to see.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Stephanie, and we've spoken about this many times. What I will say though is for the data engineers in the audience, or old school data engineers, is like data estates are still important, and the organization and management of that data is still incredibly critical. What Stephanie might be alluding to is probably as you start to get further down the data lifecycle and the use of that data and its relevance to applications. But if the data estate is not in good nick, you're really going to suffer at that application side. So there is still an important for that foundational capability and the base of the pyramid for that data management to really be established. That doesn't mean that those individuals can't start to learn some more next-gen technologies as they start to move down the life cycle. But this doesn't absolve anyone from being responsible of managing the data estate. It still needs to be top shelf.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, for us, we're in the earlier innings of our data and analytics journey, looking at how we're going to leverage the great new opportunities that AI and Gen AI enables in the future. And it's still very foundational. I still very much value people in IT who can speak the language of the business and understand the business through their business partner's eyes and be able to help translate that into tech needs. And increasingly, they're working with someone in the business who has a business hat but a solid tech understanding. And actually, those two people working really closely together can be tremendously powerful. But would also echo, actually, the basics of data have never been more important. You've got to understand the data. You've got to understand what it is, what it means, how it can be used, and how it can be leveraged. And I don't think that's changing. It's just getting more and more important, if anything.
Dave, before we talk about the next point, I just want to say, as you were talking right at the start of our conversation, we're talking about CIOs changing their archetype as well. And you touched on something before. I also think the next generation of CIOs are starting to embrace these roles more because they've maybe had a bit of a different path to senior IT leadership. Some of the CIOs or senior IT stakeholders that I work with, they have a background in finance, or they have a background in commercial operations as well. So some of that initial pathway is really becoming part of their business acumen that they're taking into technology roles. So that also is a good vehicle and a catalyst for this shift in understanding and thinking about what the IT leader should be responsible for.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to have the CIOs. I think are more and more immersed in the business now. So even if they've come from that functional area, they're gaining more experience and expertise as they collaborate with their business counterparts who are picking up more and more tech expertise as time goes by. And actually, that combination and that partnership at all levels, from the executive level all the way down, to be able to look together at how to solve problems and common needs. I think that's a hugely important thing for CIOs going forwards, because ultimately you're still there to partner to solve business problems and business needs and help push a business forward. And so it's much less, it's a little less technical than perhaps it was. But I think that's okay, and I think that will continue. You still have to know how to leverage all the technologies that are out there, but it's a slightly different emphasis now.
Thanks. I think that starts to really address one of the questions we had from the audience here, just making sure that we've got it. So one of them was around how can CIOs help other functional leaders put their enterprise hat on versus just considering the personal fear and influence. I think you guys have kind of hit on this one a little bit. Anything else you guys would want to add? Because we also have a couple more coming in. Okay, great. Another question. So if two different questions. One's going to be a little bit more around sort of the role of the CIO. And let me get this to the group. And then I don't want to miss. There's also a question around sort of AI ethics that I think is a really important question about how we're incorporating that too. But first one, and Dave, this one's directed to you from the audience. Was around data democratization. Seems to be a major initiative for CIOs and tech leaders for swift decision making and a driver of value creation. As access to data increases, how do organizations put safeguards around data flows to ensure integrity, right decision maker, that kind of thing? And I think this one dovetails into the AI part, because then, like, what are the AI ethics, guardrails and things that are being set up?
Yeah, I think it starts with the right governance at the right time. I think governance can sometimes be a bit of a scary word, but it's applying the right concepts to make sure you're protecting the data in the right way as you grow and evolve, and as the amount of data you're storing grows as well. Mm-hmm. That it's organized properly, that you know who's got access to it, that the right people have access to it, that it's being managed as an organizational resource, and there are owners around the organization who own different aspects of it and collaborate together. So I think those are absolutely key. That's the way we approach it. Yes, we organize it all centrally, but I think that in business ownership of each business system is really, really important. And because it helps also those users. Increasingly, systems used to be very stovepipe, right? They used to be just used within one business unit. Mm-hmm. Increasingly, there are these broad sets of tools that are used in multiple areas, and they're very, very cross-functional. So it's changed the emphasis and the needs of people who own that data, because now it's not just them using it, it's people across the organization. So they have to be able to understand that and collaborate with people in how it's managed, how it's maintained, how it's used. But I think you have to start with this base notion. It's a company resource, and we can all drive value from it. And I mentioned we're a federated organization. We've got analysts who have access to the data they need to do their jobs, and there's some process to make sure they've got access to the right data, and it's incredibly empowering.
Dave, sorry, Steph, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add real quick. I do think too, agree on the democratization and all that you said. I think what we're seeing is there are a lot of organizations revisiting data governance holistically, coming up with cohesive data governance strategies, and frankly refining their operating models in a material way to support just that, Dave, because it is shifting. I think there's an understanding and frankly with the need and the access required of data for other parts of the business to do their jobs, it's a requirement. So we are seeing a lot of organizations spend a lot of time revisiting governance, making sure they've got the right stewards in place, making sure that they are keeping that data, not only to make sure that it's secure, which kind of touches on some of the ethical components we talked about earlier, right? Making sure it's complete, it's accurate, it's secure, et cetera, but also just to make sure that the right data is going to the right places and not being misused in any way, whether that be for analytics or AI or whatever the use might be.
Mm. And I think to add on to that as well, it's evolving. It's sort of, these things aren't static, manuals that sit on the shelf. These governance models need to continue evolving, and that's been actually a change. They used to be more static for longer periods of time. They're now evolving more frequently.
Totally agree. Yep.
And I'll add, because it's near and dear to my heart, that the operational approach that actually feeds into the value, right? Like, for those who've read the article again, there's a recalibration of the definition of impact. And the CIOs still need to fulfill the role of trusted operator. We're talking about business co-creation, business partnership, but they still need to fulfill that trusted operator role. And that's where you achieve the harmony between operator and business co-creator, because you have that partnering role in realizing both top and bottom line value for the enterprise. But some of the things that CIOs can consider to establish in feeding into the realization of business value are a series of leading metrics that they might use to examine their contribution to the overall success of the enterprise through their data program. I typically think about it in 3 buckets, right? The first is a classic IT service quality bucket of questions about uptime, question about incident count, mean time to failure. You can even put data quality in there because data as an asset does have a quality score. Delivery efficacy, assuming that a majority of people on the presentation might be adopting an agile approach to data ops and enhancements. What's your sprint velocity look like? What does your burn down look like? What does your feature flow look like? Right, which is an indicator of how effectively you're delivering against your data consumers' requests. And then finally, some sort of outcomes metric that is close to what you control. Maybe something like usage stats for your highly used reports. If a report is being used 100 times every hour, it's a pretty important report to the end user persona. To more sophisticated metrics of whether or not, conversion rate of automated marketing promotions has increased because you revisited a customer segmentation approach, right? And more tightly defined a customer segment who would react favorably to marketing outreach. Those are the things that operationally CIOs still need to think about as well, and can bring to those governance conversations to indicate this is what I'm doing to make sure that we're realizing that enterprise value through our data program.
Yeah, I think that's a great add, Dom. I mean, like you can't stop thinking about the operations of the running of the business and how important these things are, and it can get lost in some of the prioritization efforts of the next gen AI POC that we need to get out, but we can't serve our customers if we don't have the basic operations. And it's not even fair to call them basic, right? Because they're not basic anymore. They're very complex, running well. We had a question here again from the audience on this. It's a little bit about, I'm going to paraphrase the question a little bit about the maybe perceived tension, but the idea around a partnership between the CIO, CFO, and there's also a question there around sort of the CMO. So we can expand the broader C-suite if you like about the importance of the partnership and what are we doing or what are we seeing in the marketplace around what good looks like in this space and how that's working. Maybe Stephanie, did you want to jump in on this one first and then throw it over to Dave?
Yeah, that's perfect. So I do think we are, so in my experience, having that relationship is critical overall. But I will say that I do think generative AI is helping catalyze and forge these relationships in a stronger way. And the reason is we're hearing a lot from CFOs, CMOs, even CEOs on this topic, because it is a material shift in the way organizations are operating, and they're seeing it that way. And so there are a lot of joint conversations where in the past we might have been told by a CFO, hey, go talk to the CIO about this, or from the CMO, go talk to the CIO about this. So we're seeing a bit more of these joint conversations, joint decisioning, joint solutioning. I mean, a lot of this is happening because of the rise of generative AI and the importance of it throughout the organization.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to add on, I see a lot of my colleagues on the executive team talking about areas of opportunity for AI and where they see the potential value to the business. It's an interesting change from many technologies that aren't as, but this one is very driven from the board, the executive suite on down. How do we leverage this? And the question is, we see this opportunity. What does it take for us to leverage that opportunity or go after it? Because they recognize there's a ton of things that need to happen in the background. And sometimes there's a discussion of pros and cons and some of the challenges as well that are associated with it. Because as with anything emerging, there's good and bad and things to work through. And Gen AI is no different, and even though it has massive potential. I think the other thing though is in terms of CIO and CFO, for my money, the relationship has changed over time. It used to be that the CFO was about, optimizing IT costs. The relationship was fundamentally driven around talking about IT costs. The change now in effective CIO-CFO relationships, and they may not all be that way, but I think the effective ones are about how technology brings value to the organization. We're back to the value thing, because that's a common goal. Cost-effective technology that drives value is good for everybody. And I think when that's the focus, whether it be CFO, CMO, whatever the title is, good things can come from it.
Dave, I'll absolutely yes. Some of the IT leaders that I speak to, the challenge can sometimes be that the enterprise value is a few degrees separated from the IT domain of decision making. It's not immediately aligned. So I'll just bring this back to some of those leading indicators that I mentioned. And if the relationship between the CIO and CFO or the other senior executive in the organization can clearly identify what leading indicators do we feel comfortable in agreeing to suggest that I'm contributing to this enterprise value realization, that can be same recipe that everyone's reading from is like, yes, we get how IT is contributing to our value. So even more incentive for CIOs to define those indicators about why their program is successful to facilitate conversations with other executive leaders.
These are some great questions from the audience. So thanks everyone that's been listening. Really hitting at the sort of the heart of some of the interesting tensions that we see. And when they work really well, how those tensions become no longer tensions, but just a great source of value for the organization. So that's great. I maybe wanted to pivot the group to think a little bit about some of the things that are happening in the current market today, and how do we think about their impacts to the business in the future. It's always hard to get our crystal balls out and sort of look into there and see what the future looks like. But I'd love to get this group's take a little bit on, we've seen a rapid rise of some of the Gen AI technologies, a lot of conversations around them. Maybe just thoughts on where you see like the direction of travel heading in the next 6 to 12 months on some of these topics, and how you think they're going to be impacted, maybe where some of the biggest places of impact might be, biggest part of the organizations that might start to feel, hey, this is where we're going to see the most amount of impact today versus in 6-9 months from now. Anyone want to jump in first, or I can call on someone?
I can kick us off real quick with just a quick notion. I think there's been, and I think there will continue to be, a focus on efficiency. And I think that, again, generative AI is just bringing that to the forefront in a new and different way. Because we always had, not always, but for the past decade or so, we've been working on automation and chat and ML and all of these other capabilities. I think now there's just, again, as Dave mentioned, it's a board and an executive conversation around how can we drive efficiency, but in a way that's going to enhance our business and not deteriorate it. So I do think it's important, again, in consumer business, which is where I spend all my time, and frankly, in travel and hospitality, I think at least what I'm hearing is how do we balance driving the efficiencies that we know we are capable of driving, but also maintaining all that makes us great, and makes our consumers come back time and time again. And I think there's going to be a continued discussion around how organizations preserve all of the goodness that they have built from a brand and a customer experience perspective over the years, and maintain that while still leveraging the capabilities that are now at the forefront.
Awesome. We'll record this, as you know, so we can play it back in 9 months to see, to test how the theories are working, Stephanie.
Okay, we'll see.
Dave, I saw you come off mute. Do you want to add, or now that I've given that caveat, are you nervous?
Yeah. No, I think Stephanie's absolutely right. For every company, there's going to be this evaluation of, I think efficiency is the right theme to begin with. I think two things are going to happen. First, you have to look and say, what's right for my brand? What's right for my organization? We're known for really strong emphasis on hospitality for our guests. It's how we think about our experience. So the way in which we think about the technology and leveraging it and the opportunity has to be through that lens. How does this augment our philosophy on experience and how we think about that very high touch hospitality we're known for? So there's that lens to look through. And again, operationally, there'll be opportunities, and it's the same thing. What's the right thing given how we think about our team members, how we set up our operations, where can we add value? So there's all that to think through. I think also, though, we've said a couple of times, there is tremendous innovation going on in the space. The amount of founders and startups in this space, it's exciting. It's a little daunting when your inbox is full of intros from them, but it's exciting. It will take a little time to shake out. And I think, and that's good. Over time, we'll start to see where the value's strongest, who's got the strongest solution, who's going after the right business problems. That'll take a little time to go through as well. And I think that's why, it will be for us more of a gradual step into the world as we see, as we answer the questions and see those things happen.
And I think I would add, just to clarify, I don't want anyone to be surprised. So over the course of the next 12 months, I would encourage people, if you are targeting the use of these technologies and the adoption of these technologies, you need to take a bit of a look at the quality of your data estate to bring it back to data management and quality. Because the success of the utilization of these technologies will be highly predicated on the inputs. So I would encourage, in parallel, while you're exploring those use cases, take a look at whether or not you are set up for success with that foundational data estate. Proper tagging, proper data quality checks, successful trusted data pipelines that are feeding data the right way. And I think you'll be taking care of the key dependency for the utilization and the realization of value from those use cases that you aspire to achieving. So don't forget the data estate. Make sure it's in top shape.
Makes sense. Great. Well, team, I really appreciate this conversation. I think it's been an excellent dialogue. I know there's been a lot of engagement, in the comments below our conversation. So appreciate that from the group too. And maybe I just sort of ask, we go around the group, and if there's a final message or comment you want to really re-emphasize for the group that you'd want to share, and I can start wherever you'd like. Whoever would like to go first.
I'll kick off and then leave it to the more senior focus out. All I will say is I started my career 2 decades ago, and benefits realization of what was true then is true now. Value is realized through operations and the use of the capabilities that you have. So it's a good thing to make choices and selections about where you invest, but don't ignore the operational aspect and the effective sustainment of the capabilities that you're procuring to deliver value to the enterprise.
I would say it's easy to believe depending on what you read, that every organization on the planet is rushing headlong towards the technology and is 25 steps ahead of where you happen to be. I think in talking to my peers, that's not the case. I think everybody sees the potential. Everyone sees some of the pitfalls, and it's about applying some good discipline and some healthy conversation and alignment around when is the right time and where is the right place to start. And that's going to be different for every company, and some it's going to be sooner and others later, and that's all okay.
Awesome. And I guess I'll close then, Jim, but I'll repeat the notion of sort of better together, and collaboration is key. The most successful organizations are those where the executive committee and the entire organization is aligned around what they're trying to achieve, and how the capabilities that again IT is providing are going to enable that. And having those conversations, being transparent, continuing to communicate, those are all critical things in order to be successful as an organization. And I think just really critically important for a successful CIO.
Awesome. Well, you guys have been great. Thank you so much for the time today, Dave. Especially thank you for carving time out of your day to engage with us and the audience in this conversation. Super important. The space is dynamically changing every day and faster, as we've started at the top of the conversation. So it's great just to learn how everyone's thinking about this. And I think I just love, and one of the things I'm taking away from this is this conversation, the continued linkage of the importance of data connected to the value, prioritizing our initiatives, and really lining everything up to the strategic plan of the organization, like making sure that we don't lose our North Star in the conversation about why we're doing the things we're doing, why we're applying the technology. And it goes back to the strategy of the business and the overall priorities that they're trying to drive, which I think is just so foundational, so fundamental. And it's great that we're not losing that in the onslaught of the latest and next great technologies that we're all seeing. So With that, thank you guys so much. Thanks to the audience for joining the conversation. We'll continue this series and continue to engage in these dialogues going forward. So we appreciate if you want to rejoin, and feel free to share this conversation with others. The recording lives out there on LinkedIn. So if you're interested, please do that. Our next session will be, we'll skip a little bit over the holidays in the US, and the next episode will be on January 11th. With that, thank you again and appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.
Artificial intelligence is taking humans to places we couldn't go before. That's what makes this the age of with. The next question is, where can humans take AI? AI is an ecosystem we all contribute to and benefit from. The next important insight could come from anywhere. And with so much happening so fast, this ecosystem needs a focal point. We created the Global Deloitte AI Institute to answer that need. What role can AI play in my business? How can we use AI in trustworthy and ethical ways? Why isn't there more diversity in the AI workforce? How does my AI career start? And where is AI going next? The Deloitte AI Institute is leading the global conversation on AI. We are connecting businesses, universities, think tanks, policymakers, and startups. We are highlighting today's visionaries, data scientists, and emerging trendsetters. From the boardroom to the college lab, the Deloitte AI Institute is bringing forth insights and using our deep knowledge of all aspects of AI to make sense of this complex ecosystem, cutting through all the hype and providing insights to help enterprises make informed AI decisions. I'm Beena Amanat. I'm the Executive Director at the Deloitte AI Institute, where we are not just preparing to meet the AI future, we are shaping it together. Join me online to find out more.